Angela had always lived a life rooted in order. Every morning she woke at 6, stretched by her sunlit window, and brewed her favorite Earl Grey tea before settling down to review briefs for her clients. Her house, a neatly kept 2-story brick home at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, reflected her personality, organized, elegant, but never ostentatious. She had grown up watching her mother, a school teacher, and her father, a postal worker, battle through years of systemic injustice. Their resilience had shaped her, and when she became a civil rights attorney, she carried that same fire into every case. People in her community admired her, but the police, many resented her, because she didn't bow down when they flexed their power. That evening, Angela had planned nothing more exciting than enjoying her tea and catching up on a new legal journal. Her cat, Justice, purred lazily at her feet as she hummed along to the quiet jazz music filling the kitchen. The scent of bergamot wafted through the air as she poured steaming water over the tea leaves. Life, for a moment, was perfectly still. Then came the pounding. It was so sudden, so violent that her teacup rattled in its saucer. Angela froze, her hand tightening around the handle of the pot. The pounding came again, louder this time, reverberating through the walls. Shouts followed deep, commanding voices. "Police! Open up! You have a warrant. Step outside immediately." Her pulse quickened. Through the kitchen window she saw flashes of blue and red lighting up her manicured lawn. Confused neighbors peeked. Through their curtains, Angela's stomach dropped. What could they possibly want here? She hadn't done anything. Her house was the definition of clean. Justice darted upstairs, spooked by the commotion. Angela wiped her hands on a dish towel, her lawyer's brain already clicking into gear. A raid on her? She didn't buy it. Not for a second. She crept toward the living room window and pulled the blinds back just an inch. The sight outside sent a jolt of anger down her spine. 6 officers in tactical gear stood in formation, weapons pointed toward her front door. The beam of a flashlight scanned across her porch.
Out.
Another officer barked into a loudspeaker. "Angela Williams, this is the police. Come out with your hands up. We have a warrant." Angela's mind raced, but panic never took hold. Years of training, of battling shady tactics in courtrooms, had prepared her for this moment. She knew the law, and she knew intimidation when she saw it. Something about the way they refused to actually present the warrant set her teeth on edge. Neighbors were stepping out now, whispering among themselves. Phones began to rise, recording. The cops didn't notice or didn't care that their theater of power was already being documented. Angela inhaled slowly, straightened her robe, and walked calmly to the front door. She cracked it open just an inch, enough for her voice too. "Carrie? But not enough for them to barge in? You say you have a warrant?" she said evenly. The lead officer stepped forward, his shadow looming across her porch. "That's right. Now step outside." Angela's eyes narrowed. "Slide it under the door?" The officer hesitated. His jaw tightened, but he didn't move. "We don't have time for games, ma'am. Open the door." Angela let out a soft, humorless laugh. "Games. You come onto my property, weapons drawn, yelling like I'm a criminal, and you expect me to take your word for it? I'm not stepping anywhere until I see that warrant in writing, signed by a judge, and specifying exactly what you're here for." The officer shifted uncomfortably. His partners exchanged glances. One muttered something under his breath. Angela caught it. She's not buying it. Her suspicion deepened. These weren't seasoned detectives executing a lawful search. This looked and felt like harassment. They knew who she was, and they were hoping to rattle her, maybe force their way in on some flimsy excuse. She raised her voice slightly, enough for the neighbors to hear. "You want entry? Show me the warrant. Until then, this door stays closed." Officer's bravado cracked for just a moment, but then he barked, "You're obstructing justice." Angela tilted her head, almost amused. "Obstructing justice would be letting you trample my rights. I know the Fourth Amendment better than you do. Slide the warrant or leave." The tension thickened like smoke. Cops hadn't expected her to stand so firm, so quickly. Usually, people cracked under that kind of pressure. They stammered, pleaded, or panicked. But Angela was unshaken. her voice carrying the same authority she wielded in court. Inside, her tea still sat cooling. On the counter? Outside, the crowd of neighbors was growing, murmuring louder as they realized what was happening. Phones zoomed in, catching every moment. The officers shifted, their power play unraveling under the weight of Angela's calm insistence. One officer leaned toward the leader. "She's recording us," he muttered. Angela smirked, holding up her phone through the crack in the door. Its red recording light glowed like a warning. "Oh, don't worry," she said sweetly. "The whole world is recording you tonight." The lead officer's face hardened, but his silence told her everything she needed to know. There was no warrant. There never had been. Angela's heartbeat slowed. Her confidence solidified. Whatever game they were playing, it ended the second she demanded the law. They could threaten, shout, stomp their boots all they wanted, but without paperwork. Without proof, they had nothing. Still, she didn't let her guard down. She knew well enough that power, when cornered, could lash out unpredictably. She kept her voice firm, her door chained, her body poised to shut it at the first sign of a push. And as she stood there, framed by flashing lights, she realized something profound. This wasn't just about her anymore. Every neighbor watching, every camera rolling, was seeing a woman stand toe-to-toe with authority and refuse to bow. She was defending not just her rights, but theirs too. The officer finally spoke again, his tone sharper, desperate. "Ma'am, step aside, or we'll be forced to escalate." Angela raised her eyebrows, her lips curling into the faintest smile. "Escalate? Without a warrant? Go ahead. That'll look real good on camera." Nobody moved. The air between them crackled with the weight of standoff. The cops wanted her rattled, begging, submissive. Instead, she was steady as stone, her voice clear, her will unbending. Angela knew the battle was far from over. But in that moment, she had already won the first round. She had called their bluff, and the hesitation in their eyes confirmed what she suspected. They had no legal ground to stand on. Her tea might have gone cold in the kitchen. But her resolve burned hotter than ever. The night air was heavy with tension, but Angela stood like a pillar against the storm. Her phone's camera was steady in her hand, its red recording light glowing defiantly through the crack in the door. The officers outside were still bristling with weapons and authority, but their confidence was beginning to waver. They had expected panic, a trembling homeowner too overwhelmed to question them. Instead, they had Angela Williams' civil rights. Attorney who had spent years dismantling cases, just like this one, inside courtrooms. Her voice was calm, but loud enough for the crowd to hear. "You have no warrant. You have no right to be on my property. This is an unlawful attempt at intimidation, and I will hold each of you accountable for it." The neighbors gasped audibly. More people had gathered on the sidewalk, their phones raised high. One teenager whispered, "Dang, she's schooling them." Others nodded in agreement. Some even began live streaming. The lead officer, clearly flustered, tried to reassert himself. He stepped closer, his boots thudding against the porch. "Ma'am, we can get that warrant. If you don't comply, you're only making things harder. For yourself." Angela narrowed her eyes and replied smoothly, "If you could get a warrant, you would have already had one. Empty threats don't scare me. Produce the signed document or remove yourselves from my property." He opened his mouth again, but Angela cut him off. "Badge numbers. All of you now. I want them stated clearly for this recording." The officers froze like deer caught in headlights. She knew exactly what she was doing. They gave the numbers. They'd be tied to this unlawful stunt. If they refused, their silence would be damning evidence. Either way, they were trapped. When none of them answered immediately, Angela's smile was razor sharp. "That's what I thought. You're not. Here to execute the law, you're here to abuse it. But tonight, I'm the one in control." The crowd outside began murmuring louder, emboldened by Angela's confidence. A man from across the street shouted, "Yeah, let her be. She knows her rights better than y'all do," one officer hissed. Under his breath, "We need to wrap this up before this gets out of hand." Angela raised her voice, quoting like she was in a courtroom. "The Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. That means you cannot enter my home without a warrant signed by a judge, specifically describing what you're looking for. Your presence here is illegal." Her words carried power. They weren't just legal jargon, they were a shield, one she wielded with precision. The crowd began clapping. Some even started chanting softly, "No warrant, no entry. No warrant, no entry." Angela's phone buzzed in her hand. Notifications flooded and her live feed was gaining traction. She had over 1,000 viewers already, people tuning in as the story spread across social media like wildfire. She angled the camera slightly, making sure to capture the officers' faces. "You are live," she announced, her voice clear and firm. "The entire world can see this. Let's go ahead and try to force your way in. Show everyone what you really stand for." The lead officer's face darkened. He hadn't signed up for this level of exposure. He barked at his men, "Stand firm." But his tone lacked conviction now. His authority was crumbling. Angela saw the crack widening and pressed harder. "I've spent over a decade in court defending clients from unlawful raids just like this. You think I don't know your tactics? You rely on fear, on people not knowing their rights. But I do, and I will not be bullied." Her words hit like hammer strikes. One officer shifted uncomfortably, lowering his weapon slightly. Another glanced nervously at the cameras recording from the sidewalk. The illusion of dominance was dissolving before their eyes. Angela took a step closer to the door, her phone still raised. "I demand you leave my property immediately. If you do not, I will file a formal complaint, pursue civil action, and make sure every one of your names is attached to a lawsuit. Is that what you want?" The silence was deafening. The crowd had grown to nearly 50 people now, some in pajamas, others wrapped in jackets. A little boy on his father's shoulders whispered, "She's like a superhero." His father nodded, eyes fixed on Angela. The lead officer finally snapped, his voice sharp but shaky. "Fine, we'll be back. Don't think this is over." Angela's laugh was low and cutting. "Oh, it's over. You lost the second you showed up here without the law to back you up. Now, leave. Walk away, before you dig yourselves in deeper." The officers hesitated. None of them wanted to be the first to retreat, but none wanted to escalate either. Their weapons lowered. Their stance shifted. The chanting from the crowd grew louder. "No warrant, no entry. No warrant, no entry." Finally, one officer muttered, "Let's go." The lead officer glared at him, then at Angela, but the fight was gone from his eyes. He motioned sharply, and one by one they began retreating down the porch steps. The flashing lights still painted the night, but the power behind them had dimmed. As they retreated to their cruisers, Angela raised her phone higher, ensuring every step was captured. "That's right, walk away. You have no business here." The crowd erupted into cheers and applause. Some neighbors clapped Angela on the back, others shouted words of support. "You showed them. That's how it's done. Legend." Angela didn't bask in the praise. She simply shut the door gently behind her and leaned against it for a moment, exhaling deeply. Her tea had gone cold, but she didn't care. She had protected her home, her dignity, and her rights with nothing more than her knowledge and her resolve. She glanced at her phone, watching the live feed climb past 5,000 viewers. Comments streamed in, "Queen, teach me my rights. This is how you shut them down." Angela smiled faintly. She hadn't just defended herself tonight, had educated thousands. Her cat Justice padded downstairs cautiously, tail flicking. Angela bent to scoop him up, stroking his fur with steady hands. "We're okay," she whispered. "They thought they could intimidate us, but not tonight." Outside, the cruisers pulled away, their lights fading into the distance. The street was still buzzing, neighbors talking animatedly about what they had just witnessed. Angela knew tomorrow the story would be everywhere, from local news outlets to national social media feeds. But for now, she was content. She returned to her kitchen, reheated her tea, and sat down at the table. Her laptop was still open, the legal journal waiting. She sipped slowly, savoring the quiet after the storm. The law had been her weapon. She had wielded it flawlessly. And as she glanced out her window at the street, now calm again, Angela felt a quiet satisfaction. She hadn't just protected her house, she had set an example, one that her neighbors would never forget. The flashing lights faded slowly down the street, the whine of the sirens swallowed by the distance. Angela stood still at the window, arms folded, her phone still in her other hand, as she kept recording long after the last cruiser turned the corner. She didn't stop the live stream immediately, not because she wanted attention, but because she understood something vital. The moment wasn't finished yet. People were still watching, still waiting, still learning. She angled the camera toward herself and spoke in that same steady voice she had used on her porch. This is what it looks like when you stand your ground and know your rights. Wanted me afraid, they wanted me quiet. But the law is on our side if we choose to use it. Never forget that. Her live feed comments exploded hearts, clapping emojis, fire emojis, lines of "Yes, Queen," and "Teach us more." It was overwhelming, but Angela knew this was bigger than her. She ended the feed, saved the video, and exhaled. Her shoulders dropped as the adrenaline finally ebbed from her body. Angela's neighborhood wasn't quiet, though. People lingered on the sidewalk, talking loudly, their voices a mix of shock and triumph. A group of teenagers huddled together, replaying the stream on their phones like they were reliving a legendary sports moment. Older neighbors shook their heads, saying things like, "I can't believe they thought they could pull that on her. Of all people, and she handled them better than anyone I've ever seen." Angela finally stepped outside again, phone tucked into her pocket. She didn't go out to gloat. She went out because she knew her community needed reassurance. The crowd turned toward her like she was a magnet. Applause broke out again. Someone shouted, "You're amazing." Someone else yelled. That was history right there. Angela raised her hands gently, and the noise quieted. "I appreciate the support," she began, "but this isn't just about me. It's about all of us. They tried to use intimidation to make me a victim in my own home. But the law belongs to everyone. Every single one of you here has the same rights I just defended. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. A young mother holding her child stepped forward, voice trembling. "I wouldn't have known what to do if they came to my house like that. Watching you, it gave me hope." Angela smiled softly at her. "That's why we have to share knowledge. Fear grows in silence, but power grows in truth. They depend on us not knowing our rights." Tonight, that didn't work. The neighbors nodded, soaking in her words. Few exchanged phone numbers, promising to start a group chat so they could alert each other if police ever tried something like this again. The sense of solidarity was almost tangible. It's buzzing in the night air like electricity. Angela eventually excused herself and went back inside, closing the door behind her. She leaned on it for a moment, listening to the muffled voices outside. Her home, her safe space, was still intact. She looked around at the familiar walls, the shelves lined with books and photos, and felt a fierce wave of gratitude. She hadn't just protected four walls and a roof, she had protected her sanctuary. But Angela also knew this wasn't over. Cops didn't like being embarrassed, especially not on camera in front of dozens of witnesses and thousands of online viewers. She could already imagine the whispers that would ripple through their department by morning. Some would want revenge, others would want to cover their tracks. Angela wasn't afraid, though. She sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and began drafting a formal complaint. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, her lawyer's mind working. Like a scalpel, sharp and precise. She listed badge numbers, timestamps, every word and threat they had made. She attached the video files she had already saved from her stream. By the time she finished, her complaint was a meticulous account of misconduct her tight. Undeniable, impossible to ignore. When she clicked save, a small smile tugged at her lips. They had come to her house expecting to intimidate her into silence. Instead, she was about to shine a light so bright it would blind them. By the next morning, the video had gone viral. News outlets picked it up, running headlines like "Woman outsmarts officers in unlawful raid attempt and know your rights." Viral video shows how one attorney shut down police. Commentators debated it on morning talk shows. Hashtags trended online. Strangers flooded Angela's inbox with messages, some thanking her, some asking for advice, some simply cheering her on. Angela handled it with the same calm she had shown the night before. She wasn't seeking fame, she knew. Public attention was a double-edged sword, but she also knew that thousands of people were learning from her example. That mattered more than anything. Later that week, Angela was invited to speak at a community forum. She walked into a packed auditorium filled with neighbors, activists, lawyers, and even a few local officials. When she stepped up to the podium, the applause was thunderous. She began simply, with the same words she had used that night: "No warrant, no entry." The crowd echoed it back like a chant, and the energy was electric. Then she broke down the law for them, clear and accessible, weaving legal knowledge with her own story. By the time she finished, dozens of hands were raised, eager to ask questions. Eager to learn more, Angela left that forum knowing she had sparked something bigger than herself. As for the officers who had tried to raid her house, internal investigations were launched after her formal complaint. One resigned quietly, another was suspended. The lead officer was forced to testify before a review board, his arrogance stripped bare in front of cameras. Angela didn't take joy in their downfall. Exactly. What she took joy in was accountability. In showing her community, and everyone watching online, that the law wasn't just a weapon for those in power. It could also be a shield for the people if they knew how to use it. One quiet evening, a few weeks later, Angela sat on her porch sipping tea. The sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple. Her cat, Justice, curled up at her feet. Neighbors passed by and waved warmly, their respect obvious in their eyes. Angela felt at peace. Not because she thought the struggle was over, it never really was, but because she knew she had drawn a line and held it, and because she knew others had seen it and would remember. When she finished her tea, she whispered softly, "Not in my house, not ever again." The night air carried her words like a vow that her home, her dignity, her rights were untouchable, and for the rest of the city. For the thousands who had watched and learned, Angela's stand became more than a story. It became a blueprint. Proof that sometimes the sharpest weapon isn't force, it's knowledge wielded with courage.